Yeah, we're going into Baghdad. We're going to take Baghdad. The army had been engaging on the west side of the city. They had dropped some paratroopers into the, I think, Baghdad airport. So they had a foothold there, but we were going to come in from the east. And because 24 hours prior to that, Intel had seen, or there had been a public appearance of Saddam Hussein with the crowds. And there's footage of this. I remember watching footage later on in years later afterwards. It was like, oh, the timeline connected it. He'd done his first, like, outside of this famous mosque to rally his citizens, and then taken off, and that was the last known place for them. So we were going to these palaces that had been bombed to look for him. We came in from the west side of the city, and as soon as we got on the outside, the enemy, the Fedayeen troopers, the Fedayeen were these guys in black pajamas. They were, Iraqis trained sort of like paramilitary guys. They blew up a oil tanker to sort of, one, try and get us, but also to like sort of mark to the city, hey, U.S. is in this side of the city. And as soon as that thing went on, it was like World War III. I mean, I was in the back of a high-back Humvee because it was me and a couple other 51s that had been making explosive breach charges to blow doors. Because we're going to hit a palace, we're going to have some big heavy doors, we got to blow some doors. And so while we're driving into the city, before we got to the actual city, we were making explosive charges in the back of a Humvee with lights on our heads and bumpy traffic, movements. And then as soon as like the shooting started, we lift up because we were in like this like thin, it's like little canvas backed Humvee. We open up the side thing so we can see, and I had my night vision 7 Bravos on, which is like a monocle that covers both eyes, so it's really bad. You don't get depth perception or anything. And you just see all of our IR lasers from everybody's rifles pointing everywhere, and then you see all the shots going and the tracers, and it was like intense. And what happened was we got into the city, and the Abrams, I guess, leading the way, got lost, and we had to go back through another, like, we called it the gauntlet because it was intense. I mean, there was guys on left, right, center, above, below, shooting at us, the whole battalion. It was like a shooting gallery for these guys, and our battalion loved it so much we went back through it again because we had to take another turn to get to this palace. Later on, I think the palace became in the green zone, and I think it actually was in another documentary called Gunner's Palace, I think, from the footage of that one. I think I could say, yeah, that's the same palace we hit. We fight, and that fight starts probably like 3, 4 in the morning or something. I can't remember, but we fight, and we finally get to the palaces a few hours later after taking casualties. I know Alpha Company lost Gunnery Sergeant Bohr. He got shot in the Humvee in the head, and he was killed. Then every company took casualties. Guys got shot in the back of the AAVs. RPGs were hitting Humvees.
We just had an RPG impact right next to us.
Miraculously, nothing, hit us. I mean, my buddy's Humvee got hit with an RPG and went through the driver's window and hit the driver's windshield and blew out the windshield forward. And it had hit like his isomat or sleeping mat because he had it on the side of this like thing, and that ricocheted saved, I think, a lot of people's lives. It's just like crazy stories like that happened.
Stay back. We're good.
One guy, one of the 81's platoon sergeants, he got shot. He was wearing a tanker's helmet because he had to be audioed into the AAV, and he got shot, and the bullet literally skipped over his head and went out the other side. He had like the burn mark from it, and like you could see like the Kevlar helmet. You can see the scratch mark from where the bullet just went out that way. Couldn't believe it. Like there was stories like that. And we got to the palace, and we breached inside, got inside the palace. It was abandoned. We had J-damned it weeks prior. Wasn't much into it. But as soon as we got in there, then the Fedayeen they were really attacking our position then. And the mosque was still a block away. And that was Alpha Company's objective, was to go clear the mosque to make sure he wasn't there, which I don't think he was going to be there. So they go, and as they're attacking the mosque, the Fedayeen really just poured on us. They're trying to overrun. We had A-10s come in and shoot their gun on the streets, which was really cool to see. It just stopped right there. And since we're weapons, we can hop frequencies and get on like the aircom channels. But you'd see it, and you'd see it coming in, line it up, and then you'd see it literally see the cloud of smoke, and then you'd see the jet literally slow down in space, in the air, and then you'd hear the brrr of the actual Gatling gun going. That shit tore those boys up. I mean, that gun is badass. It's a badass gun, badass weapon. Having that come in, you were like, and then I remember, because we had invaded this palace, so there was 10, 12-foot walls that we were sort of behind, but we were getting on positions on palace roofs and stuff like that to get eyes on the alleyways and the roads to fight these guys off. And I remember we had a Chinook come in, or our FAC had called in a Chinook to get casualties and prisoners out and also drop off ammunition and medicine and stuff like that. So I remember it came down, and it was like a small courtyard because all the explode, like from the JDAM, there was like a lot of debris. And he like had his tail down basically, picked up the casualties, kicked out some boxes of ammo, and then I remember it getting up, and then I seen RPGs fly by it. You're like, whew, that could have been dangerous. Like if Chinook, that's the most vulnerable position. Once it gets to like that, it's going down. But yeah, so the pilot took evasive maneuvers. I think they loaded up Gunny Boer's body on that one. But yeah, we had a good firefight that morning. Into the early, afternoon, things sort of quieted down, and we started doing patrols, and we started, fortifying our position.
I didn't have a lot of direction. I graduated high school. Of course, a lot of the really good friends I have from back then, I still have now. But it was a lot of just getting up every day, going to work. I worked at a jail before I joined the Army. I went to college the first time, and like a lot of people that joined the military, I wasn't mentally prepared or, emotionally prepared. I was still a little juvenile in actions. But it was like everybody else. You're just kind of ignorant to anything you're going to go through whenever you get in the military. So it was just living life every day. Like I said, going to work and playing with friends, hanging out, seeing family.
Just typical suburban life. Played baseball as a kid, sports, had my brothers, ran in the neighborhood, got in trouble, all the usual things. And then, around middle school and high school, I started exploring more and doing things my way. And I always knew I was going to join the Marines. Young in high school, I knew I wasn't ready for college. I didn't have the maturity, if that's possible to think like that. I don't know. I just knew it wasn't for me. And so the Marine Corps for me early on was something I wanted to do at least. And, you know, having my father serve in Vietnam as a pilot in the Air Force, he wasn't too keen on me being in the Marines because his last tour of duty was he was repatriating the remains of servicemen to Dover, Delaware from Vietnam. And so he definitely didn't want me being in the Marines. But
I guess I was just a normal, mischievous kid, you know, like to explore. I know we went fishing quite a bit. We were down to the river and just had fun as much as we could. We didn't have a lot of money, so whenever those times came that we were able to get out, you know, we made the best. And it's just going to sound silly and cat posterish, I guess, but just watching Rambo and Predator and stuff like that made me want to join. We had various engagements then on my third deployment. This was during the surge of 2006, 2007, and my unit was sent to Baghdad. On that deployment, I earned a Silver Star and my first Purple.
Oh, damn!
We were out on a joint patrol with the Iraqi National Police, and I was in charge of a small team of IMPs. So we were set up on a like at a T intersection. The enemy was behind us, roughly 100, 200 meters. If that. And as we were setting in, we started receiving fire from the rear, and I was shot. In my right thigh, and then two of my men were shot as well. I didn't realize they were shot until I moved to cover behind those walls. And I was instructing the IMPs to return fire when I noticed that I was missing two of them. I returned some fire to kind of like keep the bad guys' heads down because they were still getting shot at. I ran out and I dragged one of them, one of the IMPs. And I went back out there and was still getting shot at. I picked up the other guy and carried him. And I put him behind the wall. Returned some more fire, and my squad leader finally got to me and was trying to patch my leg up. So I was shot and just bleeding, like just drenched in blood. But I wanted to make sure my guys were good. They did have multiple shots. One guy was shot in his back and in his arm. The other guy was shot in his belly and his leg. Everything in slow motion. Everything was slow motion, and you know, the guys that saw what I did were like, "Dude, you were you know, moving so fast, and it looked like we were watching a movie." And me, I felt like I wasn't moving fast at all. Like I had sandbags weighing me down. But my guys weren't heavy when I picked them up or when I dragged them. But I felt heavy. I couldn't tell you what I was thinking. It was just get to them, you know, get to them and bring them home. And a lot of people, you know, would tell me like, dude, what are you like? Why'd you do that? You're crazy. Those guys aren't American. But they were fighting. They've been fighting beside us for a few months, and you know, you get to know people. You eat with them. You sleep with them. You know, you sweat with them. You bleed with them, and it doesn't matter if they were Americans or from Mars or whatever. They were my guys. On my second deployment, something very, very significant did happen. I received my citizenship. So I accomplished the mission that I initially set off for, and becoming a citizen and earning my citizenship. And of all places, I received my citizenship in Iraq, in Baghdad, and one of Saddam Hussein's palaces. And yeah, it was awesome. So initially, on my first deployment, my resident alien card had expired. And the guys would mess with me like, dude, you're gonna get deported. Instead of going home, you're gonna go to Mexico. And I was freaked out because I didn't know anybody in Mexico. You know, all my family's here. And we tried the process for the citizenship. And then before my second deployment, I had taken the picture and everything. And during, if I'm not mistaken, like we were coming back from a mission, and I found out that I had to go to Baghdad to receive my citizenship. So they had an actual ceremony. I want to say it was maybe over 300 people. It was quite a bit, quite a few folks. It was just awesome because President Bush gave a speech to us, and I felt like I've done it.
The day that I was injured, we had air assaulted out around 2 o'clock at night. We rode in a Chinook out to the middle of nowhere into a valley and walked for a couple hours to set up on a clot. We were out on a mission. It was called Operation Shark Attack. It was going to last like a week or so. And it was not long after Bergdahl had gone missing in '09. I think by the way a crow flies, we were 20 miles or so, I think, away from the fob that he absconded from. But we were out to search every clot, house, tent, nomad, whatever, everything that we came across for any kind of intel, weapon, or whatever. It may not have been strictly related to Bergdahl through the private network, but the higher-ups knew a little bit more about that. So we were air assaulted out, slept in a ditch that night. It was the first time I had legitimately slept in a ditch. We woke up, had a brief firefight that morning, and then made it to the first Kalat, searched the entire Kalat, and we were there for about 2 hours too long. As soon as our fighter pilots checked off station, we came under fire. And as soon as we started receiving fire, I rolled onto all fours from the seat position, and an RPG landed under my face. You know, I got really lucky, to say the least. I caught the spin-off of the shrapnel, and the explosion kind of gave me a brain injury, but, you know, I was conscious through pretty well all of it. Got to run out to the bird after, and if I got to meet the medevac pilot, I'd love to shake his hand, because he landed under heavy enemy fire. It was a little while after I was hit that I sat against the wall for a while. The first medic that got to me, Lauren Pearson, later Lauren Haskins, she made it to me, took care of me until the medevac bird got there. We actually lost her, I think, 3 or 4 years after our deployment, where demons kind of got the better of her. And yeah, Lieutenant Lyon ran me out to the bird. He tried to get me to be carried off, and I said that I'm not being carried off, I'm running off. So he picked me up, put my arm over his shoulder, and we ran out to the bird and got to take off like an episode of MASH. It was great. So I had my M4 set next to me on the bipod. I had just eaten my first MRE in 2 or 3 days. It was just, we were so burnt out on MREs that, I lost close to 80 pounds on deployment, at least. It was pretty great for myself. But the moment that we came under fire, kind of like the first firefight, you just take cover. So I rolled onto all fours, and as soon as the RPG hit, it was just black. I was able to stand up, and as the light started coming back, I could see some dust and blood pouring over like a bad movie. So I knew something was wrong. And my buddy Catneo was on the exact opposite side of me from where I was, where the RPG impacted. Thankfully, he got a few small lacerations to his arm. Years later, I found out that he actually rode the medevac helicopter with me. I didn't tie 2 and 2 together until I got to take my lieutenant deer hunting years ago and really recap on what happened. But I could see the blood coming over, made it over to the wall, called for medic. My buddies got the medic down there to me, and she covered up my face with some gauze. Was, just tending to me as Lieutenant Lyon, just, our hero. He's running back and forth, directing fire from 3 squads. I can't say enough good things about him. He kept running by asking if I had been hit with morphine yet, and finally just told our medic to give me morphine, and it felt like you hit the bottom of a roller coaster. I asked her to never do it again. I didn't really feel a lot of pain. My face was lacerated from side to side, from the nose over to the right side of the eyebrow. My eye, we couldn't tell at the time. It had been, cut in half. A couple muscles, my tear duct. Kind of had shrapnel everywhere. And then, of course, I had to bleed on the brain, but all I could do was feel pressure, which maybe it was shock, maybe it was just, thankfully, I couldn't feel the pain. But, and then I just sat there, listened to my guys, lay down fire and get after it. And sat there for a while till medevac was able to come in. Like I said, I was able to run out under my own power and get on the bird. And then we made it to the first medevac station in Fob Shank, where I was checked out. Catneo actually came in because I screamed like a little girl whenever they were checking me for blood everywhere. It was kind of a funny scream like a little girl, but it was still pretty bad. And then, I was medevaced all the way to Bagram for surgery. I was asked in Shank to call my folks, tell them what happened. I didn't want to tell them. A month earlier, I'd hit an IED, and I didn't want to call my parents, but I had to call my dad. They made me. And I told him, hey Dad, I hit an IED today. I'm fine. I just tore some muscles in my chest. A couple weeks later, I hit my second IED. That one wasn't very bad at all. We were transporting spaghetti for our 3rd platoon. We got to go in and take showers for the first time in a month. And we were bringing hot chow to the guys. And whenever we hit the IED, I was the only one in the back of that truck, and it just threw spaghetti and marinara sauce or ketchup in the Army everywhere. So I got out of that truck and I was covered in ketchup and everything. But my second IED, I didn't have to call my folks. After being injured from the RPG, they asked me to call my parents at Fob Shank at the first medevac station. I wouldn't do it. Got to Bagram. Before they even talked about doing surgery, they asked me to call my parents, and I said no. The 3rd time was right before I went into surgery to have my eye removed. The surgeon came in and told me I had to call my parents, or they were going to call them for me. So I called my dad. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in the United States, in the Midwest, and got to wake him up, say, hey Dad, it's Michael. He's like, yeah, I know. What do you want? Because I understand, he's sleeping. But I got to tell him, hey Dad, I got hit, might lose my eye, they're gonna try and save it. I had a lengthy argument with the surgeon, with a few threats in there because I'm young and dumb, and asked him to call Mom and tell her what happened. And not long after that, I think the entire, my entire hometown of 1,000 people knew. But went through surgery. They did take out my eye. Woke up to a priest giving me my final rites. I told him, hey bro, I'm not done yet. And then just sat there. You know, I'm in Bagram's hospital. I can't do anything combat-wise. I'm not any good to my guys, and was just waiting for the next step. That's where sat there for about a day, and then we loaded up and flew to Longstuhl in Germany. And then not long after that, we flew to the United States to Walter Reed to be in the hospital for almost a year and a half. Going to appointments, going through occupational therapy, rehabbing for my injuries.
My platoon commander, Lieutenant Glover, was very aggressive and very interested in getting into fights. And I remember one morning we were in Fallujah, waking up on the squawk box. We were kind of like, half of us are awake, half of us are sleeping at night, sort of doing that. And I remember he comes with the squawk box, which is like a little speaker in the MV. It's like they put a roadblock up down by this mosque on Michigan. We're gonna go pick a fight. I said, did he just say that? He said we're gonna go pick a fight. It's like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. Like, ah, man, okay. So we get on the road and go to Michigan. We push down to where the mosque is, and then the T section is Route Violet. And they create this little, like, I mean, it's like a couple tires and a couple obstacles or whatever. And as soon as we get down there, an RPG flies over the truck behind us, his hood, blows up, and then it was game on. They basically try to ambush us from Violet. Well, in the Marine Corps, we're taught, if you're in an ambush, you push through it, or you take the fight to the enemy. So we're lead gun truck. We literally face down Violet and gun it down Violet towards these people shooting at us. And there's a guy, Hayes, our 50 cal machine gunner on our truck. He cut him in half. He was behind a bulldozer blade shooting at us. And the rounds, boop. And then like I realized that we're in an ambush, like on Violet, because I see like I don't think they were expecting us to come down as fast. They're like scrambling to get behind barriers to shoot at us. I remember a guy with a PKM is like behind these concrete blocks, and I see him trying to line up his shot, and I start shooting him. I just remember my peripheral vision seeing RPGs flying over our hood, and we're gunning it. And then you hear the squad like, turn around, gun one, turn around, gun one. And Peter was our driver. When we took that turn onto Violet, pushing down, he'd gotten shot. We didn't know what happened. He's like, oh, my ass hurts. And we're like, just keep driving. And he's like, he's on fire. Is anything on fire? Am I on fire? I'm like, you're not on fire, dude, because I'm back right. And I see that he's got blood on his guy. I'm like, you got shot. It must have been through the firewall. You're fine. It's not like spurting or nothing. Just sit on it. You'll be fine. And but like then that squawk box was like, gun one, turn around, gun one, turn around. And he's supposedly like, turn fucking around. And I remember this, like, it's almost like it had to be from like a Hollywood movie. I remember we turned around and you see the whole platoon up on Route Michigan. We were the only truck that had gone down Violet to get fight with these guys. And then I remember turning around, RPG smacking in the road in front of us. And some of the guys in the other gun trucks and the other trucks were like, dude, I just remember you guys disappearing behind clouds of like RPG explosions and then driving through it like it was like a Hollywood movie, like us coming through the smoke clearing still in one tack, like in one piece. And we're just, firing our way down Violet. And so we linked back up with the platoon on Michigan, and the platoon commander's like, hey, Glover's like, hey, we're going to call for tanks. We're going to go down there and clear it. Don't do that again. And so we calls up tanks, and tanks come up finally. They're so slow, and they're like, so I'm like, you guys are an armored tank. We have nothing here. We're fighting. We call the tanks up, and then we start pushing down. And now what's going to happen is we were on this side of the city in Fallujah. We had now taken up to Michigan, and now we had to clear west. So Alpha and Bravo Company now had to start clearing west of all the ground we had just taken on Michigan so our flank wasn't exposed. And so they start clearing, and we push down Violet to do a blocking position to hold Violet. And it's pretty kinetic. There's fighting. Our tanks are shooting its main cannon and stuff like that. And we're like, hey, Peter's casualty. He's good for now. He's sitting on the wound, but he'll need to be medevac. So we hold the line for like maybe an hour or two before Alpha and Bravo can finish clearing all the buildings that are south of us. of bad guys so they can take this now new position, and that's our line of anybody in front of that, bad guys, kill them.
Hey, let's watch each other's back, man. Watch each other's back.
Roof's clear, we got roof.
Yeah, that was a crazy day. Got pretty kinetic real fast.
So later on that day, we made another movement, and that's whenever I got injured. My weapon squad leader was shot in the head, and I went to try and retrieve him so that my medic and I can work on him and I can call it in. And as I was dragging him, the ground collapsed underneath us, and we fell roughly 50, 60 foot into a caress, into a hole. You couldn't tell there was anything there. Like it was covered up, camouflaged so good. So good even that the weapon squad was posted up almost on top of it, and there was a small little berm that I wanted to get my weapon squad leader behind, so it could provide us some sort of cover or something, because there were still rounds coming in. And as I was dragging him, I can remember like the rounds coming in around us like a cookie cutter. They were just landing around us, but not hitting us, thank God. And I remember that there was another guy that was shot as well through the femur. And again, there was three injured. I think I remember exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking like, man, it's gonna be, booby traps, gonna be some punji sticks and everything with me seems like forever, right? Like when we fell, I felt like I was falling for an eternity. Like I had time to think about, man, there's alligators in there. There's explosives down there. There's any type of scenario that you can possibly think of probably went through my head at that time, just thinking about it. And I remember hitting the ground and just instantly feeling an enormous amount of pain. And as soon as I hit the ground, my weapon squad leader landed on top of me. And so I had not only my weight, but his on top of mine. We could barely fit in there, and I remember having to call up and let the guys know that we were in there. They seen us fall, and I remember having to assess Bashard's injuries, having to see if he was alive, if he was okay. But I guess with all the pain, we were both in and out of consciousness. I fell straight down. I felt like I hit so hard, and maybe you're talking about close to 500 pounds of meat and gear. impacting. My fib tips broke. I have so much hardware in there right now, and they had to split my legs open in order to save them, because there was a possibility that I would lose them. We were in that hole for roughly 2 hours.
And so we secured that site. I had Saddam's revenge that night again. So I stayed up on the turret the whole night for my truck because I was like, I can't sleep. I'm gonna puke and shit myself. So it'll be fun. And I remember the first mortars that came in, and they hit. And it was early light, like just first light. They weren't near us, but we're like, hey, sir, I think we're getting bracketed. Like, bracketing is when you shoot a mortar and you sort of adjust and you shoot again. You kind of, okay, now where are we going? So the platoon commander's like, hey, yeah, let's mount up. Let's start moving our gun truck positions. Let's move. And as we're doing that, a mortar lands in between our truck and the high back, which the high back has no armor in the back. It's literally an open bench seat. You guys are just hanging out there, and they get pepper shot. And so then now we have casualties. So Lieutenant Glover's like, hey, we're gonna have to call this one out. We're gonna have to bounce. We're not gonna hold this position, because what we were gonna have to do was hold that position until they could get like a wrecking crew out there with a big 18-wheeler flatbed truck that they would, with a crane, that could pick that helicopter up, put it on this truck thing, and then haul it out of there. That's got like 2 or 3 days worth of sitting around in the desert waiting for that to happen. We had a summer mission later on that sucked. So he's like, hey, we're gonna call it in. They're gonna have to blow it in place. They're gonna have to drop a JDAM on it or something. It's because we have casualties. And as we get together and we start pushing down on this road, we take this road, and that's when the real ambush happens. We're in this road that's literally lined up with just reeds. Deep gullies and reeds, because it's farmland. So they have this natural defense that they can hide in, and they just start chewing us up. And we're pushing north through this town, this little itty bitty town, and it's bad folks in there too. They're waiting for us. RPGs, all that sort of stuff, and we fight our way through that. Somehow in the firefight, our crypto in our radio gets kicked and it drops. So we're only able to talk on unsecured comms to the other trucks, and the rest of it's our private channels just garbage. We can't communicate with the rest of the platoon. But anyways, so I think we have to fall back in and let someone else take lead. And the whole goal is to get to the Cloverleaf. That's casualty collections point, and we're a few clicks away. We're like 20 minutes away. As we're driving through that firefight, Boy is in one gun truck, and he's in a high back, but he's on a mounted, he has his light machine gun saw. So he's on the top of that Humvee, basically pretty exposed, shooting, and an RPG hits, and hits his leg and cuts his femoral artery, I believe, and he dies that day. We fought through that ambush. I'm sicker than hell. I had Saddam's revenge, so I'm like totally like just beasted out of me, like nothing in me. I'd fired all my rounds. I had like 14 or 16 magazines. I'd gone through all my ammo. We fought in that firefight, and we get to the Cloverleaf, and we give Boy to the medics, and they're trying to do the resuscitation. I'm sure I didn't really observe. I was away from that, looking at other things. And then we go from the Cloverleaf back to our soda factory, where we're sort of staging our operations, and all of our trucks have like a lot of damage, so the mechanics are working on our trucks to keep us operational. And that's when Lieutenant Glover. He called us together, let us know Boy didn't make it. The day was still young, and we were still QRF. And I think it was Charlie Company's AAV. It might have been Bravo's. One of them, they'd pushed past Violet. They were doing like a little patrol mission, and their AAV, I think, got disoriented or whatever, and it went past Violet, and it got ambushed and got mobility kill. The driver, he got hit with a couple RPGs. The driver was killed instantly. The lieutenant and their platoon commander, had a basically RPG that was like a armor piercing, so it basically turns into liquid hot copper and burns. He had gotten a critical hit through his leg. Luckily, it's cauterized his wound, so he didn't bleed to death, but he was donezo. So his guys got out and took over a building next to them where the AAV was immobilized. And then they were getting overrun. And so we as QRF have to spool up, and we go in there to try and get them out. We get out to that location, and it is very kinetic. It's a hornet's nest. They're trying to overrun those because they want that AAV for propaganda. They want to kill that platoon and get shown on Al Jazeera News. And so Glover calls up the Abrams tanks and is like, "Hey, you guys are towing this thing out of here. Figure out how to rig this thing for tow, but you're towing it out of there." And I just remember hearing like the Abrams tanks guys were like, "Oh, it's getting dark." So he's like, "We're out of here. You're in an armored vehicle. I don't want to hear it. You're rigging this thing for tow and you're pulling it out here. It's not going to be used. There's a dead Marine in here. You're not leaving him." And so we were holding down the position, and I think it became too dangerous for our Humvees because we had an RPG hit under our vehicle and blow us up. And we were all sitting there in quiet, and like nobody's injured, and Lieutenant Glover's like, "Hey, pull the Humvees back and just hang out this phase line, and we'll come to you and pull this out." So we got the AAV out of there that night, and it was a long day. In between Boy's death and us responding to that QRF call, I had been like given a bunch of IVs because I was just done. The medic, the corpsman, was like, "Hey, you need some liquids," and so they put me with like 4 or 5 bags of IV, and I was still barely hanging on. I was real sick. That was a long day. That was a tough one. But I think what shone was the leadership of my platoon commander, and like he was like, "We can sit around and wallow about it, or we can continue our job." And I think that was the best thing for the platoon. Boy's death really affected the platoon. I know that. Universally loved. I remember in Okinawa, he'd gotten in a drinking incident, and we were only there for like 3 months, but they have this unique thing in Okinawa called CCU, Correctional Custody Unit. And he'd gotten sent there because he'd gotten another NJP, busted down in rank. And in CCU, what they do is they take small rocks and make them into smaller rocks and move those small rocks across the parade deck in bags. Like, that's all they do. And they'll move the other rocks and break them with hammers, make them smaller, put them in sandbags and bring them up. That's their days of activities. And they march around like boot camp. And it's like real crappy to be at CCU. I remember he'd be in lunch in the chow hall, and we were already combat vets, and we'd make fun of like the MPs that were guarding, and we'd get him in so much trouble. We would just talk shit to his guards, tell them they're pussies, pogues, and they would just take it out on Boy. But yeah, Boy was just loved. He could sing. He could sing his ass off. Dude could play guitar. Saparsky. This is when Saparsky really started to shine as a sergeant. Cold as ice on the comms, not freaking out when we're in an ambush, just being like, "Yeah, contact right, blah blah," just like monotone. Like I'm like, I don't know, I'm behind him, but it's like I'm shooting and shouting. Like at some points it's pure terror in those ambushes, and it's a miracle. Like I mean, our Humvee was riddled with holes. We had RPG blasts in it. It was amazing how that truck looked at the end, until it got blown up. But yeah, Fallujah. And then the sad thing is, after that day, a couple days later, maybe a couple days, they came and told us that we were pulling out of Fallujah.
Whoa.
And that really, really was a gut punch, because like we had taken all this territory. We were, a quarter way through the city. We were going to finish the city. We had the momentum. We had them on their ass. They had politically been trying to delay our offensive. That's why we had to halt in operations at Violet. We couldn't go any further. They didn't want us. They had done a political agreement, and our snipers were killing these guys. I mean, we had them on the run. We were going to take that city. And politics came in and squashed it, and like had us walk, basically they pull out of the city with these like Iraqi army units that didn't know which side of the gun to look at to shoot, take over our positions. And like, of course they were hand in hand with the insurgents. We spent a month in Fallujah, and to have that sort of taken from us was really, it eats at me today, because 3-5 and all those other units we had going there in November shouldn't have had to. We could have finished it and been done with it. So, yeah, that's something that always eats at me to this day.
I decided to do this because I got tired of losing people. I mean, I got out around 2013. I separated from the service. And I'm probably averaging around 6 to 7 people, or at least one a year. And I think I just got tired of losing people, man. It's one thing to put money towards a charity, or, say, I support veteran suicide, or I wear a bracelet for 22, veterans a day that commit suicide. But I wanted to do something, and it kills me that I can't be everywhere. So I hope that this film is some sort of force multiplier, what we call it in the military, to help veterans know, like, hey, man, you're not the only one. It's okay. And then also to bring awareness to the general public that it's not always PTSD. It may not be this thing or that thing, but they're struggling with something. And just recognize that and just understand that, veterans, it's okay, fucking ask for help. Sergeant Kershaw, needs help sometimes. Sergeant Hernandez needs help. Sergeant Span, Sergeant Gomez or Specialist Gomez or whatever it is. It's okay, man, We got your back. It's not, and again, like I'm sitting up here talking like it's fucking easy before you ask me that question. It's not. There's no pill, no matter what the VA prescribes you. It's always gonna be there. You're changed forever. You just gotta deal with it. You gotta surround yourself around people that make you know, like, hey, you're not the only one going through it. You can beat it. It's like an ongoing battle, right? I don't think I've beaten it, but I've gotten better. That thing starts crawling up my back again. I know how to deal with it, and everyone deals with their own way. I know how to deal with it. But my daughter, because at the time my son wasn't born, and I remember, my wife would. So the kind of like the battle rhythm we had every day was, and granted, if you were to look at me outside of everybody, if you were to look at me like in a box of like, how is his transition going? I think you would probably think I was doing okay. I work for a major company, doing well, but that shit doesn't matter to me. And I was chasing something, and I think I fell into that purpose, community, and identity bucket personally. And it didn't hit me till 5 years later. And I can remember the battle rhythm we had was I would always take Camilla to school. No matter what, that was my thing. Daddy took her to school. And I worked, then I drop her off, go into work, travel, do whatever, go to DC, do some meetings, come back, and then, you know, if I could pick her up, for the most part, I picked her up. And then we got home, Joanna, my wife, kind of took over. Like, she was, you know, the one that was really good at putting her to bed. She wasn't a good sleeper, so she would do that. She was the nurturing one. So I had this dead space of like from 7:30, and I didn't go to bed till like 2 every night, of just like up in my own thoughts. And around 2019, I would just sit there and stare at a fucking blank TV screen, and I couldn't understand it. I didn't. If I could explain it visually, and this is what I tell the other veterans when I'm explaining it, is like, it feels like if you could look at my body and something would represent like that feeling. It feels like black tar is like slowly creeping up, and you're trying internally in your head to fight that motherfucker off. And then you're just like, what the fuck? And then, you know, it creeps up there, and then you're just super fucking depressed and angry, and you can't figure out why. You don't think anyone fucking understands you. All of us have fucking guns. So you're fighting to, you know, to not make yourself a target, a 50-meter target, right? You know, your closest threat. And for me, my purpose and who saved me was my daughter. Because I couldn't imagine, and it was bad, and I couldn't imagine her waking up and seeing me like that. And more importantly, this may sound weird, in my head I was like, fuck, who's gonna take her to school? She's gotta get to school. She counts on daddy to get her to school. So I think it was less of her finding me, because I feel like, you know, somebody else would have found me. But it was more like, you know, my baby counts on me to take her to school. So you know, one day, I think one day, she's gonna know. She's gonna know that she saved her daddy's life. Yeah.
So getting out of the Marine Corps, I was eager. I got home on a Thursday, and by that Tuesday, fall semester at community college started. So like, my brother flew out to Camp Pendleton. We got in the truck and we did a road trip for like 10 days across country, which is awesome. I needed that. It was a good experience, but it really helped me decompress, but then hit the books right ahead, right from then on. And the suicides and all that stuff started happening a few years later. All the traumas finally caught up to us, I think. We lost some guys in combat, but we lost more to suicide. You know, the first one that I knew of was Nelson. He was an 81s. I knew him. Evidently, he'd been recalled back to the Marines, and I don't know, something either wasn't allowed to be infantry, or they weren't going to let him serve in that role. I've heard mixed stories, but he took his life. And then Saparsky and another Sergeant Mansfield, they went up to pay respects at the funeral as our unit.
War takes a toll and a price that, you know, you can never necessarily justify, but it's something that's got to happen. It's going to happen. You know, inevitably, just like kids on the playground, they're going to fight at some point. War's a heck of a lot worse, but in a lot of instances, you can't get around it. Luckily, you've got people that'll go out and fight it for you, so you can sit back and have that argument. You know, you can armchair quarterback anything that you want, but until you've been there, you'll never really know, you know, what war means to a lot of us guys that have been there and fought it.
Man, the transition was scary. It was scary because, I mean, all I've done for the past 16 years was the Army. And I was afraid. I was afraid that I would fail as a civilian. I was still learning to walk. Whenever I was retired, um, I had to wear braces for a long time, and even to this day, I still do. Um, but having a good support group like family and you know your brother-in-laws and uh, stuff like that was very very beneficial for the transition because they just showed me all kinds of love and letting me know that everything was going to be okay. Um, I have lost quite a few actually, um, and. And just not too long ago, we had a guy that committed suicide. I mean, these are all good guys. These are all great guys, and you wouldn't expect that from them. You wouldn't expect them to take their lives and put their pain onto somebody else. And the thing is that when we as veterans commit suicide, we don't stop the pain. We inherit it to our loved ones, to our kids, to our wives, our husbands, our parents, our siblings, just anybody else that cared for you. And so I think it's very important that we have a support group.
I was in school at the time. I think I was going to college in D.C. and Ski. I'd talked to Ski the week before. He was going to get out. He was getting medically separated because of the brain damage from the explosion that we had together. And I was like, well, that's good. You got all these options. You got school, man. You're going to be great. No worries. You have a wife and kids. He's 2 sons. And he came back from that funeral, and Lieutenant Russell had dinner with him that Sunday. I barbecued with him, and that Monday he killed himself, shot himself in the head. That's the toughest one, because Ski was a great leader. We got along. We were best friends, and to see how quickly he deteriorated. And he was still active duty, and he'd been promoted meritoriously from sergeant to staff sergeant and made gunny real quick. It's unheard of in the Marine Corps. And yeah, for him to take his life, I wasn't expecting it, didn't believe it. Still, at times, don't believe it. And that was a hard one. The whole platoon felt that one, I think. I've tried to make amends with it, but it's something that lingers with me. And then from that, we learned about Heinzig, who was my platoon. Heinzig had gotten out around the same time I got out. He had a baby mama in San Diego, and he was having custody battles with her, evidently. And his dad came out to help him, try and get him on his feet, help him, get right with things. I think his dad was a veteran Navy too. And Heinzig comes home from work one day, and his dad comes in walking in, and then Heinzig shoots himself in front of his father. Killed himself right in front of his dad. And I only learned about this because a few years later, about 5 years ago, in 2016, I took a road trip, visited the graves of the guys that we lost. And I left my contact information and a little memento and a T-shirt, I think, of a unit. And Heinzig's grandma got a hold of me, and she had been down at the plots a week later after I'd visited for her husband. Her husband had finally passed away, and she told me the story of what happened to Heinzig. And then she told me that 5 years after Heinzig killed himself, his father killed himself. So this grandma was out there burying her husband at a grave, family plot, where her grandson and her son were buried because of this war. And I went and visited Boy's grave and Lieutenant Childers' grave. And at Boy's, I met his mom. She met me out there. She took a break from her factory job in, Hornady. She works for Hornady. And she met me at the gravesite. And then I noticed that there was another headstone with Boy on it. And she told me the story that Boy's brother was in the Army when he got killed, and he was getting out already. And a few years later, Boy's brother took his own life. And I totally believe it's because of the war. He lost his brother, and he probably had his own traumas that the military wasn't dealing with properly. So, and the tragedies keep going. I lost a lot of guys to suicide. It's tough. And, you don't know who to point the finger at. I do know that some of these pharmaceutical companies they put these guys up on wasn't helpful. I know without a doubt that caused a lot of the issues. The VA couldn't handle it, handle the volume of patients, couldn't give the one-on-one care, the direct counseling they need. Just give them drugs, numb them out, cope them out, make them numb. They won't respond to anything then. And it's been fatal ever since they started doing that.
And in the military, we always talk about not failing, not letting people down. And that was one of my fears too, of letting my mom and dad down, or letting my nieces and nephews down. And just thinking about all the people that I would hurt just because I thought that it would end my pain. And just opening up to somebody. And that really helped me out quite a bit, because you feel lighter at the end of the day. I've called the hotline, and I was a bit disappointed with it, because it's not like you talk to somebody right away. And I wish that we could talk to people.
I now have a lot of regrets, or things I've had to come to grips with, as far as understanding my role in a war that, when you look back on it, don't make sense. It was tough to see Afghanistan go the way it did, especially knowing all the sacrifice put in that country as well, and the treasure. Fuck the money. People made plenty of money off this war. It's really the guys, the lives. Even the Iraqis and Afghanistan, or the Afghanis, I feel bad for them worse. We fucked them up, made them dependent, then left them hanging to dry. And it's something I have to accept my role in. At the time, I wouldn't take anything back. I wouldn't. If you give me the experience, I'll take it over again. I'll do it again. But it's tough to realize the consequences of these decisions our country made, our leadership made. I definitely think, it could have been done differently, and it should have been done differently, but I think at the bottom, there's money to be made, and people are wanting to profit off of this. It's sad. But yeah, I got into college. After I graduated from my 4-year university, I got into private security myself. It's good money, and I was addicted to the adrenaline. It's a simpler life overseas. You have a job, sleep, work out, eat. Job, sleep, work out, eat. So it's simple. You don't have the gossip. You don't have the what's going on in this city, or what's going on here, this controversy. It's a simplified life, and I loved it. And I got addicted to the adrenaline rush of combat. My whole time in university, I kept on trying to join military. I joined a LURS unit, a National Guard LURS unit, long range surveillance unit, because I wanted to get trained and I wanted to continue to fight. And when Ski got killed, I I got real close to joining back in the Marines and going back in, because I was like, I gotta get into a fight. I have some anger issues. And luckily I talked to Lieutenant Glover still. I was really in good contact with him, and he sort of said, hey, do yourself this, go to school, complete school. If you want to go in, you can go in afterwards. And so I'm really glad he told me to do that, because at the time I didn't have a real good compass. I'll go with any direction. And to have him encourage me to stay in school, and I did it. It's an accomplishment for me, especially going to like the school I went to. If you would ask my peers in high school, they probably would have thought I could get into it and go to that school. So I was kind of spiteful. I think I mentioned it early on about being enlisted and of taking the dummies route, going enlisted. So for me, I had this chip on my shoulder for sure, and I probably still do, about the wasted lives. I finally have accepted that we probably shouldn't have gone into Iraq. Looking at the facts now, knowing we kind of all were lied to. I mean, they used General Powell and all those people as pawns to set something up that I think didn't need to happen, and it's sad that nobody's been held accountable. Our government lets them get away with it. I definitely have some issues with the way we abandoned things in Iraq. And hell, if I would have lost, I remember being in Kuwait searching the desert because someone lost a bayonet. We weren't allowed to leave. We had to get online and look for a friggin' bayonet that's maybe $20 worth of equipment. Yet the generals were allowed to leave billions of dollars of equipment in Afghanistan, and nobody's held accountable. And it's just hypocrisy to me. And I can't accept that, like, they taught me all these values and these things that were important to me, and to turn around and them not even live by them and hold themselves up to the same accountable things that I was held to. It really is frustrating to see. So that's my gripe of the year, I guess.
I like to go hunting. I go deer, go with some buddies and go elk hunting and all that. And there's no comparison. You're taking a life, but one's feeding your family, one's taking another human off this world. At the end of the day, while we were deployed, it kind of turned into who's making it home tonight, you or me. And I want to go home worse. I want to go home more. Whenever I came back, I went and found my childhood priest, tried to talk to him a little bit about it. He's an older gentleman, and he definitely gave me his time, but when you haven't been there, you don't really understand. There's one priest I wish I could run into back home near Kansas City. I think he retired as a captain in the Marines from Vietnam. Yeah, the Vietnam era. But, it's really something you've got to come to grips with yourself. You're sending 18, 19, 20-year-olds over there if they're fresh and they're taking lives. If they're not lucky in a facetious way, but the part of the military that actually sees direct combat is very, very small. So if you are lucky in the fact that you're part of that percent, you need to have your head on right. I've got some friends that grew up the same, they're the same age, grew up close to the same way, but in different parts of the country, and I know that a lot of us have handled it all differently. Taking a life it's not something to be taken lightly, but at the end of the day, I want to go home more, and I'm going home to my family. So you made your choice, and I made mine, and you're going to meet your maker, not me today.
When you leave the military, you lose your purpose, your identity, and your community. I was fortunate. I came home and I came back to my old high school buddies that were still around, and family and friends that were still there in the community. And so I sort of had some people to safeguard me a little bit. Like I did implode, and they told me to do something, I was going to do the opposite. But they at least kept, they kept the rails on, it kept me on the rails. I think for a lot of people, they lose one, 2 or 3 of those purpose, identity, and community, and it creates a downward spiral. So much so. I think with Ski, I look back, they were taking away his purpose. They were taking away his identity. He was no longer going to be allowed to be a Marine. A very good Marine. And I'm sure he had his own issues with the war and his own family issues. You know, I don't know exactly what led him to pull that gun out. But I know he was suffering. And, you know, like, I lost my identity, but I still retain it. You know, I still will tell people I'm a Marine. But I think people, the military does a good job of taking people, making them into killers. It doesn't do a good job processing them out to be quote unquote normal. And it's not their job to, really. They have a mission. It's not to all through the back end stuff. I think we're realizing it now, and I think there's put a great effort into counteracting the negative things. It's changed, you know. The talks of mental health you didn't talk about it in 2004, 2005. Kidding me? No, you're not talking about it. We're not pussies here. I knew I was fucked up, but I always knew I wanted to work in the government with a security clearance, so I never brought it up. It took me over a decade to finally admit that I had PTSD. And it was only after I was working overseas I was like, I need to get help. I need to have a quality of life that it's worth what I've done, what I've put myself through. I think that's one of the bigger things is, and I think it plays with some of my childhood trauma was I've never felt worthy of love. And
what are your hobbies now?
So I weld sometimes. I do fishing, take the kids fishing, or heck, just last week I took my niece and my nephew's Tito's kids to go look at alligators, and like I just enjoy seeing their smiles and their that's what makes me want to wake up in the morning, to where they call for me, and I don't want to let them down. And so I think if we as veterans find something that makes you want to wake up, then we need to look for that, for whatever it is. As long as it's productive, then I think we'd be okay.
But I really think, like, the brothers I served with, I'm so glad I can be in contact with a lot of them. We've stayed together. We stayed pretty close together. And a lot of us have found our paths in unique ways. You know, I think for a lot of them, and I encourage all of them that I served with, to do alternative therapies. There's not a silver bullet that's going to fix a veteran. There's multiple paths to finding a purpose, a place in society, and your new tribe. I'm so grateful that I have the guys I served with still around. They'll check me when I'm fooling around and being an idiot, but they'll also tell me, you know, hey, it's not that big of a deal. You screw that up, who cares? You know, the bigger picture of things. They put things in perspective for me that a lot of times I forget. Especially like my buddy Joe Wells. He lets me know that, like, I don't owe anybody anything. You know, if I want to do this for the rest of my life, I'm good. I've made my peace. I have my friends. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. If there's something I want to accomplish, I can accomplish it. But I think a lot of veterans get themselves into trouble is, in our society, I can order everything to my house and not have to deal with a single human being. I don't have to engage with anybody. And that's not a good thing, is what I try to tell people. We're social creatures. We need to have social interaction. We need to have connections. And where our fear is, like, we had this deep, deep bond. And I know, what's that author's name? Sebastian Junger, he talks about that. And I agree with his book, Tribe. you have these deep connections with these guys. They're intimate, you know, deep jokes, deep, like just meaning with each other. And then to part ways and rip each other out, it's hard. For years after getting out of the Marines, my goal was I want to be wealthy enough to be able to pay for everybody's family to come to a reunion for a week from each deployment, because each deployment we had different guys with us, and do a big, huge way, and be able to be so successful. That was my big, hairy goal. Be so successful that I could afford to pay for everybody's families to take the week off, you know, all that sort of, have all sorts of therapies and, you know, ways to reconnect. And I realized, like, I'm not going to get there professionally, but maybe there's a way for me to be a part of a nonprofit that can do something like that one day. But it's tough to see guys go home and suffer, especially when you knew them in the military as like the good to go guy, the guy that was reliable, the guy who will watch your back, and to see how this rot has set in with our country, with drugs, with meth, with opioids, and the same problems that plague these veterans are the same problems that plague our nation. And it sucks that nobody wants to step up and try to really go after these things. It's disheartening to see my buddies, some of them, you know, I love seeing the success stories. I've got guys that are successful, and it's not always the boo-hoo thing. They've taken those experiences and turned it into something positive, used it to make themselves plenty of money and build a family that's full of love. Then I've seen the guys that have really self-destructed and, you know, done every bad decision they could think of, if not more. And I think a lot of it is a lack of services initially, maybe, or you know, had something gone a different way, break another way, maybe they'd have a better step forward and never a new start. But it's tough to see. You know, that's part of like the road trips I've done cross country multiple times. It's like, it's for me, I'm going to be selfish. It's a lot of me. It feeds my heart to be able to see these guys again. But it's also, part of it is me checking in on them. And like, you see the guys that are really proud to show off themselves. They're like, hey, this is my best friend Staples. I lived with him for 4 years in the Marines. And Stack, nicest dude ever, from Youngstown, Ohio. Big brother, looks like Mike Tyson. Has a lisp, and me and him were roommates, and we fought with each other initially, and then we became brothers. He came home with me on leave. And when he got out, he was a big guy, so people like to try to test themselves with him, and he wasn't going to back down from a fight. Evidently, he got into a fight in Ohio and got arrested and got put in the system. And that system holds on to him. I did that road trip part of it to reconnect with him, and I did meet up with him. I got to hug him, I'd see him, but I could tell he was shy, didn't want to talk about his past, didn't want to talk about what he's up to these days, because he was in and out of like the legal system and didn't have a whole lot of opportunities in front of him, especially in like Youngstown, Ohio. It's hard, but his family's there. Guys like him, I wish I could get a hold of and give another opportunity, or just offer them whatever they need. You know, like they're the ones that I want to encourage to get services. I'm fine. I can advocate for myself. It's those guys like him. And since I saw him, I've been out of contact with him. Can't get a hold of him. I've gone back to Youngstown, Ohio on my road trips and knocked on doors and asked around, but still can't find him. And that's like, I guess my big hairy goal eventually is to have a real reconnection with him and other guys. You know, I'm not worried about the guys that are still texting me and I see on social media maybe. It's the guys that have quieted it up, so that you see them extract themselves out of life. Those are the guys I'm worried about, because it's never good, you know. Guys shouldn't have to fight these battles by themselves. You know, ancient tribes, they're warriors. They came home to different settings, and I think for our veterans, we need to figure out a way to bring these guys home and let them integrate into a society that understands them. There should never be a military-civilian divide or veteran-civilian divide. That's just veterans trying to put up walls. I read a good story from a ranger who wrote it. Basically said, yeah, I had best friends, best brothers in my life but that was 20 years ago, and I have 60 years of my life ahead of me. Is that the last of my relationships I'm ever going to have? No, you have to build new relationships. You have to find people that may not be valid. Now, I still have a habit of finding veterans, and they gravitate towards each other. But I do try to find people that aren't veterans to engage with. They might think my humor's a little sick or weird, I cuss too much, but I do try to connect with them because they're Americans just like me and you, and I want them to understand what sacrifice is. That's why I tell my story, or parts of it, to anyone that asks. It does me no good to hold on to it. Nobody knows what sacrifice is. Nobody knows what the cost of sending our youth to fight, What's the true cost? Well, I'll tell you the true cost. People like Heinzing. That whole family's destroyed now. Boy, that whole family's devastated. That's the hard part.
Troubled eyes looking out at the rocks does help praise as the bullet shells drop. Be careful, don't be eager when your finger's on the trigger. Out in the open and your gun's all you got. Sin is like a wildfire, souls are quick to burn. When will I learn that sometimes pain is undeserved? Be careful, don't be bitter when you could be a forgiver. Out in this world, left alone with your thoughts. And I wish I could revive my soul, but maybe I'm too broken. Don't hold me liable if I'm not outspoken. They say I'm tribal, but don't lie, though. Leaving all my life for revival. But a broken tribe is all I know. Would you care to try to understand the hurt that was felt by some worn out hands? Be cautious when you listen, 'cause the tears don't seem to glisten out in the middle of the desert sand. Would you come running to show me your love if I said the memories are all creeping up? Be cautious with your talking, don't you know that I was walking or carrying the weight of a hurt?